The economic earthquake that just hit North American soil wasn't the result of months of agonizing talks or slow-moving bureaucracy. No, this disaster struck with the sudden violent impact of a lightning bolt. In a span of just 3 days, the entire manufacturing foundation of three separate American states has been fractured. In that same 72-hour window, we watched automotive stock prices plummet toward the basement. We are looking at a singular event that might have fundamentally rewritten the map of how things are made on this continent. Today, Canada stepped over a threshold that officials in Washington were praying they wouldn't touch. And the moment that boundary was crossed, the American auto industry was left flat-footed, unable to shield itself. The strike was precise, it was calculated, and it carried a level of economic force that is nothing short of devastating. This is the reality of what happens when trade disputes move past angry words and turn into action. This is the reality of tariffs triggering a massive counterattack. And this is exactly what it looks like when America's oldest and closest friend decides they are done being pushed around. If you want to stay ahead of these global economic shifts, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications right now so you don't miss a single update. For the last year and a half, if you knew where to look, you could see the smoke rising before the fire. It wasn't in the press releases or the handshake photo ops, it was in the silence. Canada has been incredibly patient, waiting in the wings, but that patience was never about weakness. It was a strategy. They have always played the game with a certain level of politeness, a predictability that Washington took for granted. But the reason alarm bells started ringing in D.C. this week was because that polite predictability vanished. Experts who watch the flow of money across our borders noticed the change immediately. The private phone lines went dead. Trade negotiators were quietly pulled out of scheduled meetings. There was a sudden hush-hush movement to secure backup suppliers and a suspicious amount of coordination with partners in Europe and Asia. All of the usual chatter stopped. And when a country like Canada stops talking about trade, it's usually because they are getting ready to scream. Most people in this country simply do not grasp how deeply woven our two economies really are. We aren't just talking about being neighbors or having a friendly relationship. We are talking about economic life and death. Every single year, more than $400 billion worth of products flow across that northern line. The car business alone makes up nearly $100 billion of that pie. You have parts stamped out in Ontario that get bolted into cars in Michigan. You have engines cast in Ohio that are trucked up to assembly lines in Quebec. It's not just buying and selling. It is one giant, breathing manufacturing organism that just happens to sit on top of a border. And today, Canada threw a massive wrench right into the gears of that machine, a wrench that is going to cost us dearly. In the early hours of the morning, the Canadian Ministry of Finance dropped a bombshell. They unveiled what they are calling a comprehensive tariff response package, and it includes penalties on American cars that we haven't seen in more than 80 years. Measures of this magnitude are not used lightly. Canada only pulls this lever when they want to send a very specific message, that talking is over, that their patience has evaporated, or that they are now willing to engage in open economic warfare. Analysts were scrambling to figure out if it was one of those reasons or all three combined. But the one undeniable fact is that Canada has completely changed its stance. When the nation that shares the longest undefended border in the world suddenly shifts its weight, Washington has no choice but to stare. And these are not slap-on-the-wrist fines. We are talking about a 25% tariff on American-made vehicles, 25% on auto parts, 25% on the steel used to build them. And then there is the kicker, the detail that caught everyone flat-footed, an extra 15% surcharge on any vehicle that has parts inside it which benefited from U.S. government subsidies. That last part is a surgical strike. It is aiming directly at the Inflation Reduction Act. It is aiming at the CHIPS Act. It attacks every single industrial policy the Biden administration and the current leadership have used to try and rebuild American factories. Canada essentially just looked the United States in the eye and said, if you want to use government money to buy industrial dominance, you are going to pay for it when you try to sell it to us. And that bill is going to be massive. The reaction from the White House tonight was anything but standard operating procedure. It was frantic. It wasn't the usual diplomatic fluff. It was a cry of urgency. Senior officials came out of emergency meetings calling Canada's move hostile, totally disproportionate, and this is the key part, strategically designed to cause the most pain possible in swing state manufacturing hubs. But here's the thing about being strategic. It only works if the other guy blinks. Canada didn't blink. In fact, the package they revealed today is one of the most aggressive retaliation efforts we have ever seen in the modern history of North American trade. Just look at the immediate fallout. Within 6 hours of the news breaking, General Motors saw its stock value nosedive by 11%. Ford immediately put a freeze on announcements regarding 2 of its plants in Michigan. Stellantis sent out a panic memo to its suppliers warning that chaos was incoming. These aren't just little bumps in the road. These are crisis-level events. These are the kinds of moves automakers only make when they are bracing to lose billions of dollars. The Canadian finance minister stood up in Ottawa this afternoon and didn't mince words. She stated clearly that Canada will not be bullied, they will not be threatened, and they will not accept a relationship where they are treated as a second-class citizen. You have to pay attention to those words. For decades, Canada accepted American dominance just because we were close by. Today, they decided that price was too high. Tonight, confirmation came down from the Canadian Department of Trade that this tariff package is laser-focused on the automotive supply chain. They are looking at assembly plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, specifically the ones that have been expanded recently to build electric vehicles. Canada made its move before the U.S. had a chance to reorganize those supply lines. They went after GM. They went after Ford. They struck at the heart of the emerging battery network that was supposed to make us less dependent on foreign components. To put it simply, Canada aimed its weapon at the future of the American car industry, targeting the very infrastructure we need to dominate the EV market. That is why the White House is in such a panic. These tariffs aren't just for show, they bite. They represent a counterattack that could cripple American competitiveness if this continues, and the administration, realizing the danger, reacted not with strategy, but with threats. They didn't ask to talk. They didn't offer a middle ground. Instead, they threatened to tax Canadian lumber. They threatened to block Canadian energy. They even threatened, and this is truly mind-boggling, to use national security laws against our closest military ally. That is not how you fix a trade dispute. That is how you pour gasoline on it. We need to be brutally honest about how we got here. The United States started this fight. The U.S. put the tariffs on first. The U.S. claimed that Canadian steel was a national security threat. Steel from Canada, the country we share NORAD with, the country we share NATO duties with, our partner in defending this continent. And now, the U.S. is acting shocked that Canada hit back. This is what happens when you have people making economic policy who don't understand economics, and people making trade policy who don't understand trade. The American auto industry is the victim of that ignorance. If you're finding this analysis helpful, please take a second to hit the like button and share this with anyone who needs to understand what's happening to the economy right now. The story gets even darker when you dig a little deeper. Economists are now suggesting that Canada's retaliation was actually a test. They wanted to see if American trade policy had any coherence left after months of mixed messages from D.C. Canada wanted to know, would the U.S. sit down and negotiate like adults, or would they just keep escalating? Well, they got their answer. Washington didn't offer a hand. They offered a fist. The response was so hostile and so damaging to our own interests that even Canada took note. It takes a lot to make Canada angry. They are usually the measured, diplomatic ones in the room. But today, the United States pushed them too far. Insiders speaking to Reuters off the record are calling this a strategic decoupling. That's a fancy way of saying Canada is trying to cut ties with an unreliable partner. Canada proved today that they are not only willing to fight, but they are capable of landing punches that hurt. Their tariffs were calibrated with military precision to inflict maximum political damage in the states that matter most for American elections. That isn't an accident. It shows intent. It shows that Canada is no longer just sitting there taking orders from Washington. They are an active player defending their own turf, and they are doing a good job of it. If these tariffs stay in place for a year, Michigan is looking at losing 40,000 auto jobs. Ohio could lose 25,000. Indiana, another 15,000. We aren't just talking about statistics on a spreadsheet. We are talking about actual workers. We are talking about families at the dinner table. We are talking about whole communities that voted for a manufacturing revival and are now getting crushed by the reality of a trade war. As the hours ticked by today, we started to see just how big this response really is. Canadian Customs didn't waste a second. They started applying the new taxes at midnight, forcing American car companies to eat the costs immediately. Provincial governments in Canada started going after American farm products that had been doing well up north for the last 6 months. And in Brussels, Canadian negotiators were reportedly working hand in glove with the European Union to coordinate a tax on American exports. This wasn't just Canada acting alone out of frustration. This was a coordinated multilateral assault. And that kind of group resistance is the one thing American trade policy has never been able to handle effectively since the first Trump term. Every time we throw a tariff, the world throws something back that hurts us twice as bad. Soybeans to China, bourbon to Europe, and now cars to Canada. The pattern is obvious, the pain is predictable, yet the policy never changes. You have to remember, the U.S. thought Canada would just roll over. They assumed Canada needed us too much to ever fight back. They thought Canada would value the friendship more than their own wallet. Tonight we are seeing the exact opposite. Canada is fighting back with force. They are diversifying, finding new friends, and building trade routes that leave the United States out in the cold. I told you 18 months ago this was going to happen. When you treat your best friends like enemies, eventually they believe you. When you say your allies are a national security threat, eventually they stop helping you with national security. When you smash the rules of trade over and over, the system breaks. That system is breaking right now, and the American auto worker is the first casualty. What makes this incredibly dangerous is the timing. Canada launched this attack right when the American president is being squeezed from all sides. You have hardliners in the party demanding more tariffs. You have unions demanding protection. You have Wall Street begging for stability, and you have regular people who just want a car they can afford, not a 25% markup. The administration is trying to juggle all of this while losing support in the industrial Midwest. When leaders are cornered like that, they don't make decisions from a place of strength. They react out of fear and vulnerability. That is when the big mistakes happen. That is when a trade war turns into a shooting war. That is when an economic argument turns into a geopolitical crisis. We aren't there yet, but we are closer to the edge than we have been in decades. We are talking about Canada, not Mexico, not China. This is the country that guards our airspace. This is the country that scrambled jets to defend us after 9/11. This is the country that has bled alongside American soldiers in every major war for a century. And now this is the country taxing our cars. Think about the failure of leadership that it took to bring us to this point. The official statement from the White House, currently making the rounds in diplomatic circles, was meant to sound tough. It said that the U.S. is not willing to accept this resistance. Officials claimed Canada's actions were inconsistent with the spirit of partnership. That is diplomatic code for, we thought you would just take the hit without complaining. You don't usually hear that kind of language unless the stakes are incredibly high, and they are. The entire North American car manufacturing system is on the line. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions in investments. And the only idea the administration has is to threaten more taxes. This isn't solving the problem, it's creating a disaster. It is the economic equivalent of trying to put out a house fire by spraying it with jet fuel. Meanwhile, up in Ottawa, the Prime Minister gave a speech to Parliament tonight that was anything but apologetic. It was forceful. He said, Canada did not start this war, but Canada will finish it. He stated plainly that they will not accept a relationship based on American dominance and Canadian submission. He added, if the U.S. wants a partner, they know where we are. If they want to fight, they will find us ready. These aren't just pretty words for a speech. This is a government that knows exactly how dangerous the game has become. It's also a message for his own people. Canadians are furious. They feel disrespected. They are rallying behind their leader in a way we haven't seen since the lumber fights of the early 2000s. That public anger gives the Canadian government the political cover to keep these tariffs going forever. And forever is a long time for American car companies to bleed money. Here is the part that should really keep you up at night. Canada didn't act alone. In the same 72-hour window, Mexico announced they are looking at hitting back against American farm exports. The European Union hit the gas pedal on their own counter tariffs. Japan ramped up safety inspections on American cars to slow them down. When all of America's trading partners start moving at the same time, it's not a coincidence. It's a strategy. It's a collective response. It is the global trading system screaming, "Enough." For years, the U.S. has operated on the arrogance that we are too big to be touched, too important to be retaliated against. That theory is being tested in real time, and right now, the theory is failing. Economists are looking at the board and seeing a few ways this plays out. Possibility 1. Canada is getting ready to totally restructure how trade works in North America. Possibility 2. Canada is trying to inflict enough pain to drag the U.S. back to the negotiating table. Possibility 3, and this is the one that terrifies officials, is that Canada is trying to build a new trading bloc that doesn't include the United States at all, deals with Europe, deals with the Trans-Pacific nations, deals with post-Brexit UK. All of these are on the table. All of them mean Canada needs us less, and all of them mean we have less leverage over them in the future. But today, Canada went beyond just looking for alternatives. They imposed costs. Real, immediate, painful costs that are being felt right now in Detroit, in Toledo, and in Indianapolis. This is a test of will. Canada wants to see if the U.S. can be reasonable or if we will just blindly escalate. The U.S. wants to prove that tariffs still work as a weapon. American car companies just want to survive without their supply chains being destroyed, and American workers just want to keep their jobs. You can't have all of those things at once. Something has to break. Someone has to blink. And looking at Ottawa right now, they aren't blinking. We have been getting updates from industry insiders all night, and the news isn't good. They are watching production lines grind to a halt across the Midwest. General Motors is already trying to reroute orders to avoid Canadian suppliers. Ford is frantically looking for parts in Mexico and Asia. And the fact that Canada didn't give a grace period, that they dropped the hammer immediately, suggests this is a pressure tactic designed to force a quick surrender from the U.S., but Washington isn't surrendering. They are doubling down. Their response today was reactive and angry, sending a message that they won't negotiate with a gun to their head. It also sent a message to American factories. You are on your own. That is the tragedy here. American workers are stuck between Canadian retaliation and American stubbornness. Factories are caught between broken supply chains and political theater. No one in D.C. is thinking about the guy on the assembly line tonight. They are thinking about polling numbers. They are thinking about rallying their base. They are thinking about everything except the economic wreckage they are causing. As we move through the week, we will likely learn more about Canada's endgame. But we know enough right now. We know the package was comprehensive. We know it hit us exactly where we are weak. We know it was coordinated with other countries. And we know Canada is done with one-sided relationships. The next 30 days will determine everything. If the U.S. decides to negotiate seriously, maybe we look back on this as the wake-up call that saved North American trade. If they keep escalating, Canada has proven they are ready for a long, cold economic winter. They have other options. They have the resolve, and they are ready to fight. If you want to follow every twist and turn of this developing story, drop a comment below on what you think the U.S. should do next. Tonight, for the first time in a generation, it looks like the United States is losing a trade war. The mood in Ottawa is calm and collected. The mood in Washington is pure panic. And when Washington panics, they start grabbing at straws they should have looked at months ago. Tonight, Canada taught the U.S. a lesson that history has tried to teach us many times. Trade wars do not have winners. Tariffs are just taxes on your own people. And your best friends can become your worst nightmares if you treat them with contempt. This story isn't over. But one thing is crystal clear tonight. Canada is standing its ground. The American auto industry is bleeding out. And the only way out of this mess is the one path we refused to take from the start: negotiation, partnership, and respect. We will be right here watching to see what happens next.